To everyone that's here so far. This session today is on why most startups fail and how AI can save yours. So we are joined by Oliver Yonchev and Steve O'Brien. So it's an exciting session. What we'll do is we'll do some intros, and then the session is going to be a bit of a joint discussion loosely around some questions that I've got on these slides. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop it in the chat and we'll cover those towards the end of the presentation slides. But we will explore today how early stage ventures can harness intelligent systems and agile design to turn ambitious ideas into scalable, fundable startups. So without talking too
Yeah,
much,
cool.
I'll pass over to the speakers. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Shall I go first?
Yeah,
I'm
go for
Steve,
it.
yeah, CEO slash chief nerd of New Icon. So yeah, my passion is technology, and been doing it, running New Icon now for 18 years, I think. So yeah, cut my chops across lots of different industries, from aerospace to med tech, through to insurance and banking. Yeah.
Over to you, Oliver.
Amazing. I'm a chief nerd at Co-Created. We're a new venture business. I'm stealing that one, Steve. My background's 15 years startups, media, marketing, tech. Done that in the US, done that in the UK, done that across Europe. I suppose one of the advantages that I've had throughout my career is I've seen lots of startups, scale-ups, being a service business for a long proportion of my career. You see the good, the bad, and the bad. Gives you a unique vantage point when you enter building startups. And right now at Co-Created, we back day zero startups. So the riskier end, when you have nothing going for you and you need to find advantages, that's the space we play.
Amazing. So
Awesome.
go to the next slide. So I've got this interesting quote here. Startups don't fail because they lack vision. They fail because their systems can't scale. So around 90% of startups fail apparently, which kind of leads me on to these questions. So what do founders get wrong about scaling? Oliver, would you like to go ahead and kickstart the conversation?
Yeah, it's a depressing statistic that would never encourage you to go start a business, your chances of failing. But the same can be said for any worthy pursuit. I always grew up wanting to be a football player. I was dead set on becoming a football player, and the chances of that happening were very low and did not happen. So we still should dream. Look, I think the reality of most businesses, there are many reasons why a business can fail, and there are many reasons why a business doesn't scale. Often it can do with skill set, capability, you're taking on the wrong problem. We have a habit as people of falling in love and having our own biases on our own ideas. I think the world of business can be ruthless. So, a healthy thing to do if you're starting and scaling a business is to be I say you have to be your own worst critic, but also your own best friend. It seems contradictory, but I think that's incredibly important. What do founders get wrong about scaling as a common theme? There are probably many reasons, but one observation is founders try and do too much. The way you operate at the early stage, where you wear every hat, you are salesperson, you are product person, you are HR, you're everything in the middle. As you start to scale, if you keep those same habits, you're probably not going to do it highly effectively. And I think generally when you start, you tend to surround yourself with generalists. I think as you start to scale, you then have to think more about specialisms. And there was a really good book I read many years ago, and I'm sure some of you have read it. It was The Hard Thing About Hard Things, kind of an iconic, very American, very Silicon Valley. But there's some wise principles in there. And one of the lessons I took from that about building businesses was hiring for strength, not for lack of weaknesses. And I think that's one of the big distinctions you tend to have to make as you shift from very early stage to scaling.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a really good summary of everything. I mean, for me, so I guess so New Icon, we help customers build technology, obviously. So we see lots of habits of startups and like what you said there, all about yeah, just when people fall in love, and it can be quite painful sometimes when you can't quite when you can see a customer who's just got this idea in their head and they think it's just so amazing, but yet they haven't got a they fall in love with the idea that no one wants. So I think that's a real challenge for as a coder by trade. I've made this mistake many times myself, but this is more like falling in love with the technology and then there's the classic. I mean, that's again the classic thing they talk about in Silicon Valley and just in tech businesses is that you know, so many companies are like, oh, we're just building amazing tech, and you can have the best tech in the world, but if no one wants it, it still fails. Um, it's a classic, find a customer and then help solve their problems. Whereas you hear like, investors, they will say they kind of want someone who knows the problem quite intimately or has experienced the problem and then created a company to solve that problem. So if they what was it like? Andreessen Horowitz they talk about like asking a silly question or a question that seems sensible, and if they almost get a dirty look from the founder, that's their test that the founder knows just so much about this industry that it's just a stupid question, and therefore the product's probably more likely to get hit because the founder themselves is the customer, and they relate to the problems, and I think that's really important. On the tech side, I mean, sort of flipping between the two as well, because when the founder is a technical founder and they're solving a problem from a technical way, it's very easy to just fall in love with the technical solutions and the performance of it and how it's faster than have this conversation before. It's like, oh yes, we'll be 10 milliseconds faster than any other database solution out there, and it's like no one's going to buy that. Like maybe some very niche person, CTO in some company might, but like you sort of sit back and listen to it, hang on a bit, like, but the customers we're talking to are MDs of large companies and they're worried about people, cash flow, and this kind of thing. They're not worried about how the number of milliseconds on their database, unless you can frame that to be, oh, that's going to save you this much money, or it's going to mean that you can scale this much better. But fundamentally for me, scaling, it comes back to the people. It's like building the right thing, and then, yeah, how do you get that team? It's ultimate humans because they're the most complex. So in my career, I definitely did that. I was just like, I just want to be the best at building technology. I want to be able to build anything from an engineering perspective, from a coding perspective, and just have full confidence of building whatever. And then if I can do that, everything will be easy. But then you realize that actually, brains are the most complex thing in the known universe, and so forth. So if you have a collection of brains, the collection of the most complex thing in the known universe, that's obviously going to be the most challenging thing, the humans. So yeah, and sometimes you see that you have a tech founder with people who are a bit better at managing the humans. So yeah, that would be my thoughts on what people get wrong with scaling.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that very briefly as well, Steve. I think hiring is the game of building business. If you're not good at hiring, if you're not good at understanding what good looks like, if you're not clear on what you want, that seems to be the biggest mistake. And also you have to bond people. You have to bond people around an idea, a mission, a set of goals. So you need people that complement one another, that actually like one another. And I think founders I see get it wrong. They, to start, try and do too much themselves. They underappreciate the value of hiring and getting good at hiring. And then they definitely underappreciate creating a culture that people want to be a part of. And I don't think you can skip any of those steps. If you don't hire the right people, you don't create a good culture, you'll never scale a business. Doesn't matter what process, what system you're taking on the most demanded challenge, problem in the world. It doesn't matter. If you don't get those things right, you'll never scale.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. Well, that moves us on to our next question, which is build it fast or build it right?
Who wants to take this one? Shall I go first? He went first on the last one. Um, so I'm a huge fan of building it fast, and mainly because you can test what you've built. Because in my experience, building the right thing is the most important because it's so easy to build the wrong thing. Now, and it also depends what we define as right. So going back to my point earlier about the right technology, that the definition of right changes based on the scale you're building for. So if you're building for, if you have a product and you know that it's when you launch time, you're going to be featured on BBC News, you've got a £10 million marketing budget, and you're going to have like millions of people drop on the site, then yes, you probably need to pay a bit of attention to some of the technology in terms of scale. This is like tech scale now. That, however, if you don't, most of the time, the narrative is you almost kind of want to make sure you have this launch where you get like 100 people beta test in the early bit, and then you gradually roll out if you're building a tech product. And then you gradually launch more on people. If you think like ChatGPT's release, they did exactly the same, right? You have like initial people join, and then you gradually roll out more and more people because you're sort of working through the bugs. You're figuring out where it's actually hard to scale. This is all about building technology, right? But when it's a complex thing that you're building, you don't actually know where those bottlenecks are until people start using the tool, because it's a unique thing that you're putting out there. And so you need to test and learn from that, but in a controlled way, and just being, I think, honest in that. And then if you think of scale, so we quite often have companies sort of even in enterprise, and they kind of want to be Google, right? So they'll say, oh, we need to use this auto scaling this and auto scaling that. And that's almost a project in itself. But then when we say, well, how many people are you going to be using this every day? If it's like 10,000 people, it's like, well, okay, you probably don't need to be Netflix, right? You don't need this auto healing, auto scaling infrastructure that's going to take us 6 months to build. You probably just need, you probably need the 3-month version of that, because you're never going to, like, a simple server can run this entire thing for you. So I meet that challenge a lot, and I blame marketing people for this 100%. In marketing, in tech products, and I'm blaming you for most of this, right? I don't know why, but you're the scapegoat here. You're just my target. It's just like, because if you're building something technical, the only thing you go by is other companies' marketing content, right? And that's not the developers that have written that a lot of the time. And so people come to us, say, asking us to do a solution, and then they bring lots of customers bring lots of off the shelf things. It's kind of like turning up to a building site, and then you take all the tools off of the builder, and you give them, oh, here's like a Fisher Price plastic hammer that I want you. Oh, here's like a drill I bought in B&Q. And you're like, thanks. Enterprise are the worst for this, because they and sort of the medium companies where they have like the IT can be quite separated from sort of tech. I'm veering off here. I'll bring my point back, but sort of IT teams can be quite separated from like that building new technology, and it's almost like that class of, and AI is almost another arm. So it's almost like this sort of information technology functions just taking over companies and having multiple strands that then don't communicate to each other, and that's a problem. So I sort of lost my track there, but generally it's kind of like building it right changes depending on the scale of your company. So, and also with software, like, you're going to learn the rules as you build. So the software on launch day is going to look very different from the software you build 5 years from now, where you've got stable customers paying you money, like, at scale. And it's also impossible to predict that 5-year point. So I'd argue you don't even try, right? You try to say, well, this is the whole MVP argument, right? But it's what can we launch and get in front of customers as soon as possible that's going to give them real value. This is also the agile thing. So and again, I've talked to enterprises about this a lot, and it's quite a challenge, because we build a large piece of software for 6 months, and it's on a staging site, but doesn't get used. If that software doesn't get used or add value until the end of the project, then you're actually just trapped yourself in a waterfall process, right? So it's all about, like, how do you deliver and test something very rapidly? And so I'm super passionate about building it as fast. Obviously, you don't want it so fast it fails, but it's kind of the classic Facebook mantra, isn't it? Be bold and break things, because speed is what you're doing is you're testing assumptions, you're testing, and the sooner you learn what's actually true, the sooner you can actually build things that people want. Now, it's easy for me to say this because I'm quite confident around the tech. We can quite easily build things and and rapidly fix any holes that might appear as people are using it. But I just think it's a challenge and it's a balancing act. And again, when people fall in love with it, that I sometimes find this strange psychology that happens where they're almost afraid to launch, right? And they want to put more and more and more and more features in, because the competitor has this feature, competitor has that. But it's kind of like the classic underdo your competition, because the more features a tool has, the more complex it is. So certainly in the SaaS world and the AI world, like the tighter it is when you launch it, the more people feel that they can sort of influence your product direction, the more sort of fans you have, and I think that builds a momentum with tech products. So it's not a simple answer, but I would definitely say always lean on the build it fast, because it's about rapid experimentation, rapid iteration. Build it right will naturally happen, but that will naturally be the result of building super fast. So yeah, I would say that's where I lean. Yeah. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Al. And I apologize for blaming you for all technology marketing content.
It's okay. The technical amongst me always remind me of what the M stands for in MVP, and apparently it's not maximum. Apparently it's not maximum viable product.
Yeah.
Look, I agree with everything Steve said, but it also does depend. And I'll give you a marketing analogy. If you're Coca-Cola, the stakes are very high for you getting your communication wrong. If you're a startup that can take risks and swing and take big bets and take more risks, you can do things faster, you can iterate faster, you can put things out, get those feedback loops. So large enterprise, I would argue you have to build it right. There are more stakeholders, the stakes are higher. But for everyone else, which is the majority of cases, startups, SMEs, and beyond, I think build it fast. And it comes down to that point around falling in love with your idea. You think it's amazing, your team should think it's amazing, the world may not. And until you start getting those feedback loops, it's almost impossible to land in the right direction. And I've come to learn that every business, you have this romantic vision of where it could be. And you should, if you're running a business, starting a business, building a startup, you should be romantic. It's audacious to think you can build value from nothing. However, the reality is the business you will become in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years is usually very different to where you start. So I wholeheartedly echo for the majority of people, build fast, execute fast, get your feedback loops, and try not to be overly romantic about what you're doing.
Great. So next question is, how can AI startups move faster and not just look smarter? So I don't know if you want to start first on this one. You guys are taking turns.
Yeah, look, AI startups move faster by not just look smarter. They move faster because there's a couple of things that AI is doing. I think it's making us all question where we invest our energy and time. In the engineering world, as developers, I have no doubt many of you are kind of offloading a lot of laborious tasks that were time consuming. There's elements in your workflow that you're integrating AI across all professional services, all white collar work. People are questioning how they integrate technology in what they do. I think for organizations, organizational design has been thrown on its head. If we now have potentially technology that's not just passive, meaning I use a tool to help me, but I can now have a tool that's active, it's automated, it can complete tasks. Suddenly that changes how I think about building a team and what skills and where do we invest. So I think AI startups will inherently move faster because they're new, they're novel, they're built on new architecture, on new principles. How can they not just look smarter? I think it's something that people in the tech industry do too much. They fall in love with the tech and not necessarily the problem. There's so much more to a business than a product and tech, generally speaking. You should be solving real problems. You should obsess over customer. You should focus on communicating as simply and as clearly as possible. You should focus on the principles and the fundamentals. And I think when you have shiny new toys and new opportunities, it's very easy to get distracted and forget the kind of core fundamentals. So if AI startups want to move faster, focus on your fundamentals, and you have an opportunity to build with the future in mind.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I might take a slightly different slant on this. Like, so if obviously if you're thinking of doing a startup, you need AI to be to have some kind of role in that, right? I think pretty much it's like it's almost like a due diligence step on the deck now. It's like, oh, how AI is going to affect this company because it's here, it's making waves. The challenge with that is how do you because almost sometimes you do want to look smarter because that's what gets you the funding, right? And then you need to move super fast to make sure that you're building the right thing and you're staying ahead. The danger here is when like, will just a generic ChatGPT or a Claude sort of eat your startup for breakfast? That's happened quite a lot. Like, will they just, is your product something that just by AI getting better, ChatGPT or one of these off the shelf ones will just do? And so it will make your company not relevant. And that's a really tricky thing for companies, I think, at the moment, because it's like, it needs to be diverse. And I know you've got Apple with their, like every time they've got some AI announcement that they're baking in. So it's quite a challenge, I think, for new companies to try and think of how do I make something that's unique enough and protected enough and occupies a sort of a niche that is unlikely to get just consumed by these generic AI models. However, if you get that right, the flip side of that is that, well, actually, if my product gets better as these AI models get better, then that's actually a huge sort of lever for that company. And so trying to get that right, I think, is tricky at the moment. And just so it because there's another side of the story. If you want sort of a fast moving company, I saw the other day, I was reading about a company. All they do is you upload a PDF and you can talk to your PDF. And I mean, it's not like a mega £1 million company, but they've made like I think 30,000 monthly recurring revenue from like just a simple website. Because as you're googling, it's like, well, I could sign up to ChatGPT, upload it to ChatGPT, and chat to it, or I could just drag and drop it on this website and pay once and go. So it's like, or even like a ChatGPT clone, like that you can buy and use as a base to build your own. For companies, they could buy that code and build on top of it. So, and those are actually very successful. It's that kind of scary middle where it's like, well, we know we're actually doing something that's like, you kind of got both scales of that argument, which seems really interesting. I mean, the other fascinating thing at the moment, which sort of boggles my mind a little bit, even being in the industry, is things like Cursor and Windsurf. So Cursor and Windsurf are both forks of open source software, which is VS Code, which we use to do our development. All they've done, I mean, say all they've done, it's a good product, but they've effectively forked VS Code, put a new logo on it, called it Cursor, and then they've effectively integrated an LLM so that you can like read your code as writing it, suggest changes. We did a little experiment to see if we could create Cursor-like features in VS Code as a plugin. So this is where you create a plugin, and it took about and it's kind of like a couple of days of work to integrate an AI and get similar features. Nowhere near as polished as Cursor, but I was like, okay, in a couple of months we could fork VS Code, and we could create a competitor, this Cursor Windsurf. So how can these open source tools that can be built incredibly fast be suddenly have $1 billion valuations? I don't think Microsoft are too happy about it. I think that's a kind of timing thing and just like jumping on the hype, which I kind of regret not doing myself now. But like, it's just so so there's a challenge there. But the main thing is that critical thinking of will my startup, will my company get better as these AI models get better, or will it become irrelevant? And I think if you can address that problem, I think that would be a powerful initial thing to think about. And having a niche really helps, right? Because you can have those specific things tailored to that piece, or a very specific problem that you're solving, then where you can integrate the AI, so it's much more powerful than an off-the-shelf version. I think that would that's kind of my take on how AI you can sort of move fast and maybe look smarter too. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. So on that note, what makes a tech stack fundable?
and this depends on the investor, I think. You know, as I was saying, there's a brand new breed of technology companies from where I see, which are things like Superbase. I think it was just announced what they called Payload, which Figma just recently bought. These are open source code bases where basically I could go and clone the entire sort of technical assets of Superbase or Payload, and create my own company almost. Their value is you just click this button and it's all hosted for you. So they're almost hosting companies that have open source tech. Um, Now, not all investors understand that model. And so they'll say, hang on, you're building technology and you're giving it away for people for free. So where's your IP? And that argument, I think, in my experience has always been really confused, but it depends on the investor you're talking to and what kind of technology. If you're building like a novel AI, like a novel LLM or a novel, very specific AI, it's almost about the data assets you have, because then you can produce a specific AI that other people can't. And that can just be using an open source AI model. It's just that you're training on your unique data that you've got. And that's where loads of these AI startups that have these quite large valuations are in. But then you have AI startups that are obviously integrating AI with a specific problem set, super valuable, giving something like ChatGPT or Claude, giving these LLMs the access to take action within a context, the ability to call functions and help you achieve goals. That's actually really powerful as well. I wonder if we're going to sort of see the movement away from generic sort of large SaaS that don't solve anything, and it's going to be more like, you know, because those tools are frankly quite easy to build now. So it's like, okay, so what does that mean for the future? Well, now we need take HubSpot, for example. Well, now we need a CRM, but how does that apply to me in this particular niche? And how is it going to be set up? What pipelines are going to have? What are the automations? That's where the sort of the value of a lot of software is. And I think we'll see new companies in that. But so it's a complex question. What makes a tech stack fundable? I would say, look, ultimately, the thing I've seen win over the years is open source. So pretty much Microsoft did a massive pivot when they were losing pretty much weren't involved in any of the internet for a while. No, none of the computers running the internet run Microsoft. They're all Linux based. All of the pretty much most of the apps on your phone running open source software. Things like Slack, Microsoft Teams, even Figma, these are all using Electron and open source stack. So that's massively just taken over everywhere. And now they've bought GitHub. They've done a massive pivot. VS Code that I was talking about earlier is actually a open source tech stack based on Electron. So an Electron again is used to do Slack. ChatGPT is built in Electron. Cursor's built in Electron. Like all of these things have this foundation of, oh, it's JavaScript, because you can port it across all devices. If it's got a web browser, if you've got a technology that has a web browser, then these technologies will work on that. So imagine devices of the future, like car dashboards, like Tesla. Even the SpaceX Dragon is a Node.js with a JavaScript front end. So you've got this just ubiquitous technology. So I would say, if an investor argues over you're using JavaScript and it's open source, I'd say, yeah, but you're getting insane distribution from doing that, and that is where the current trend is. So that's what we need to invest in. The other thing is, if you get a popular open source project and build a community around it, then there's huge value in that, because you're sort of trading the IP for eyeballs, I guess, which seems to be. I mean, I've never done that personally, but like I've seen that work incredibly well, like the Payload that Figma just purchased, which is again sort of a open source backend stack. They're really buying the community. There's a really interesting company called Pempot, which is a Figma competitor, which I've had my eye on for a while. The reason why I like them is they're using web-based concepts. Whereas Figma's obviously works in a browser, but it's Canvas, and that's a different rendering technology to what you'd say build a website in, or build a mobile app, or build a web app in. Whereas Pempot uses SVG as its rendering stack, and they've got funding. I think it was about 9 million or something to build that, but they're keeping the product free, because obviously what they want is developers and designers to start using it and creating this space where both teams interact. And so they're seeing the value in building the community. So once you've got that community, I guess you can monetize it. It's like having everyone at Glastonbury, right? your hot dog sell out when you've got lots of eyeballs in the same place. So yeah, tech stack fundable. Um, I guess it helps having, if you're a new founder, it helps having someone that can sort of give it a CTO kind of tick in the box. Um, I would say I've seen some people use my face on their pitch decks these days to say like, oh, okay, it's we've got some kind of technical oversight, and you know, that doesn't necessarily be someone you need to have on a salary, but it's like have someone just give it the tick of tech stack. The other final thing, because I've been talking for ages now, so I apologize, but the final thing, the wonderful thing with open source is no one can sort of own it and pivot. Because the other huge thing I see happen a lot when comes back to me complaining about marketing, like so AWS saying, oh, you have to build things this way, you have to use our special tool for this and our special tool for that. Most of the time, it's just open source with the UI on front that they then charge you for. Yes, you can click a button to install it, but what happens is if they get bored of maintaining that technology, you suddenly have to rebuild your app, and that happens quite often. Tech moves incredibly fast, so I'm always very nervous of building my tech stack on something owned by a company or a piece of technology that is really a recruiting project for that company. It's kind of we had the same with Google with Angular in the early days. Oh, it's Google, it's Angular, let's use it. And then they sort of got bored of that project, turned it off, and pivoted. Their developers were also like, oh, by the way, don't look at this part of the code. And that sort of shot some red flags for me. It's like, why not? And it's, oh, because you won't understand it. It's like, what? And it just because it was messy. They were embarrassed by it. They didn't want people to look at it, and that's fine. But it's having companies shut down bits of your technology is a huge risk, and it's also a massive security risk. I mean, I could talk more on dependency management, because for me, it's how if I wanted to hack any company, I'd probably look at their dependency list. I'd like quite often, it's a huge stack of cards, these dependencies in modern tech stack. Sometimes it doesn't have to be, but they are sometimes built like that. And those dependencies have dependencies, and those dependencies have dependencies, this branching tree of mess. And some of those dependencies will be maintained by some teenager who's coded it in their bedroom, who's bored of the project, and you can give them, say, 20 quid, take over that project, put your own code in that, and next time they install or deploy, your code's there, and can do whatever it wants. So that dependency management, whilst it can be fast to get things done, you sort of need some eyes on it. So I would say, yeah, signed off by something, but open source usually wins. So bet on that, and don't get too many of the claws from the big companies so that they can't suddenly shut things down on you. It would be my summary. I mean, I could talk a lot longer on it, but I'll leave it there.
Great. Anything from you all?
Yeah, tech's not as people don't generally fund tech at early stage startup. We invest in a quite wide variety of businesses. I've never liked this almost arrogant take where people say, "Oh, it's just a Chat GPT wrapper." The reality is all technology is usually built on something. We've just gone more granular, and the intelligence engine now is usually something else. I tend to think if you're looking for what's defendable, you need some defensibility, but it doesn't have to come just from the tech. So we're building a platform where the defendability, in my view, isn't the technology. It's a project we're working with that new icon on. The defendability is the regulatory environment. It's quite difficult to enter the space because the regulatory bar is quite high. So that is one area where you go, okay, well, the technology doesn't need to be defendable, but you can accrue a lot of value. The second thing I'd probably say as well is having technical people building a product. It's very rare we will back businesses, and I say it does happen. I think increasingly more, but if you don't have a technical co-founder or someone with an operational or meaningful role with a technical background in a startup, the chances are they don't know what they're buying. They don't know, even with great development partners. There's just too much of an over-reliance. So most VCs, most angels, a lot of people that are tech investors will typically turn their nose if there isn't a technical mind on the business. So I think they're two factors: making sure that you have technology represented in the ops team or the founding team. And the second thing is tech is getting less defendable. Of course, you could have unique data layers, you could have some proprietary method, but again, these things aren't as defendable as they once were. The cost to produce things is coming down radically. The speed at which things can be produced is increasing exponentially. So look for other things that could be defendable. Regulatory bar, domain knowledge, timing, speed of execution, all these things kind of matter more. I think it was Perplexity actually that, very large enterprise business that effectively built on a wrapper. Phenomenal business, no longer a wrapper, but they started as a wrapper. So I think the day one you doesn't necessarily have to have that much fundable tech, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. I mean, everything, like I was saying, it's a layer, right? So all tech is built on past tech. You don't go and build an operating system. You don't go build a server from scratch. You don't build, I mean, sometimes people do. And that's where a niche comes in, right? So for example, in space tech, that it's kind of, sometimes people do build these custom protocols and things, but for me, I mean, I've certainly talked a lot about tech, but Dole's totally right. It's not so much about the tech because, put its design, and it's sort of the theme, I guess, throughout this talk is it's about the design and the customer. Because we've always had the mantra as, design led, right? So we solve the problem first. The tech is there just to make it happen. So yeah. I would say, obviously, obviously at some point you need someone to say, is it possible? And will this work? I've seen some interesting, this is more in the aerospace, but I saw a very interesting sort of mock-up of a sort of like a flying drone, sort of like it's this new category of sort of airplane / sports car. It's kind of like a flying sports car. And it was a beautiful mock-up, but like, I'm not sure the physics was going to quite work with their design, but they were getting funding, so but yeah, they'll probably have to iterate on that. But like I said, most of the time, yeah, the tech is there to serve the customers and the problems you're solving.
Well, next question is, what role does storytelling play in building momentum? So I think this might be a good one for Oliver to start with, given the work that you're doing at the moment.
What does storytelling? Everything. Steve said it at the start. You could have the best product in the world, objectively, but if you can't sell it, you can't tell the story, you can't connect people, you can't communicate what it is clearly, it's redundant. I think interestingly, there's emerging threads coming out of storytelling. Storytelling isn't one thing. You obviously have the company, there'll be a product story, there will be a story for the team, there will be a founder story. It's kind of nuanced. You'll have different tracks and threads that you can tell, but it should all ladder up to something very clear. We call it, when we're working with the business, finding your common language. And particularly as you scale, if I asked the founder in a business, what does your business do? That should be the closest source of truth. They should be the clearest people in the business or the management team. Every couple of steps removed, if someone communicates that story a little differently, then you've not done a good job of finding your common language. There's a reality, the best businesses almost sound a little like cults. I could ask employee number 100 versus employee number 1, and it should kind of say the same thing. That means you've done a really good job with your storytelling and with your communication. And I think not enough people have an appreciation for language. The entire systems that we build on, everything is language. Language is ubiquitous. So you really have to distill what you do and spend enough time and energy. And there's what you say, and then there's what you show. And those two are different things, should complement one another. People tend to overcomplicate branding and marketing and communication. But fundamentally, it's saying things very clearly with purpose, and it's pictures, images, and videos. There's not much more to it. There's just a billion combinations that you could do. So it's very probabilistic in many respects, but I think you develop a muscle for being a good storytelling company. It just takes time, and it starts with appreciation and spending the energy on it.
Yeah.
Steve?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'll echo what Oliver says there. Yeah, 100%. Storytelling is, I think it's kind of just like how the brain works, right? It's beginning, it's moving through something. So if I'm going to be nerdy, I would say that, like there's a, oh man, do I have to go down this path? It's just, so if you want obviously your business to be successful, yeah, you need to sort of create this model in people's brains, and for them to be able to move through that and see where that's going. And according to a recent paper that studies grid cells in the brains, apparently intelligence is just movement, right? If you think about evolution, you're plotting your land in front of you, and you're figuring out how to move spaces. Think of abstract concepts and how they're obviously people are obsessing about this at the moment, because what representations do things like LLMs have, these huge statistical models of words and language, like 400,000 years of reading, but effectively they've done something a human's never going to be able to do or ingest that much content in their lifetime. And this is producing these interesting things. But then, well, what are the representations that humans have that make us so powerful? And it's to do with this movement. It's to do with, when you're thinking is a form of movement. And every part of this is going way off piste, so I do apologize, but I just think you can get quite focused, I think, and so it's almost like the scale, the altitude of where you're looking at something, and making sure that when you're thinking, I mean, I'm terrible for it, having just gone straight to talk about brains, but if you're talking at a high altitude about something, what's the movement through that space that's appropriate? What's the movement? And I think that's kind of what storytelling is, really, but in a nerdy context, I guess. If you're doing a talk or a presentation, right, you kind of want this natural flow with a conclusion, and so getting that. Yeah, I mean, historically, I've not been good at that in a business context. I'm trying to get better. But what we've always said, like, this design led, and so we try to do the same when we build a product, right? We're like, well, I mean, if we think, let's talk about products. I was chatting to our design team the other day, and they were talking about, like, in a meeting with customers that were trying to build something, they very rapidly get a prototype, ask an AI to do a prototype, and it produces hundreds of screens that kind of look pretty, right? Hundreds of them, and wow, this looks cool. It feels like you've done a lot, but those screens solve none of the problems. They don't move between sort of beginning to end result. They don't have that story. And even in computing, you talk about user stories, right? Because you have this flow of what does it mean and how can we test it, and that's true at every scale. And so it comes back to, design is how it works. It's not just about making things look pretty, and that's been the story of our company. Of, like, just let's forget technology for a moment and think about what problems we're solving and how it's solved, and how does that make the person feel, and what process are we moving them through. And that's all about moving through a space and solving those problems bit by bit. And I think people get stuck with technology because they certainly this company we were talking to, they almost overloaded by too big a problem they're trying to solve. So it's breaking it down and then moving through that stuff. But I've obviously tactfully steered that back to where I'm comfortable talking, which is about building technology as opposed to marketing, which yeah, I've always been keen to get better at. But yeah, storytelling is huge. I mean, like, just look at it in companies have been, even in the tech world, you get like developer evangelists, right? And they tell the story of why this technology exists and why you should care and get on board, and it solves these problems and blah blah blah. And that's created huge movements, which sometimes are good and sometimes are not so good, but in the space. So yeah, certainly it's the how you build momentum, isn't it? So yeah, that would be my thoughts on it.
Great. And on that note, what would you do starting out? What do you wish you did?
Mm.
I'll jump in first, Steve. My number one is have an appreciation for the hiring process. So I think, particularly if you operate a business, if you're funded or you're a service business, you tend to have a habit of making compromises, moving quickly. I think you've got to do two things: have a very high bar for hiring. You have to have very thoughtful processes. You have to be very intentional. And also then when you have great people, you really have to look after them, bond them to a culture, reward them, give them opportunities for growth, and sharing the rewards of a business success. So my number one thing I wish I had more of an appreciation for was the hiring process.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I was seeing something by Alex Hormozy the other day. He says if you haven't hired for a role that you don't know how to do yourself, you're going to get it wrong at least 5 times. I mean, it's sort of a flippant statement, but it kind of makes you feel better as a business owner because it is very easy to get it wrong many times. And obviously, the challenge is you haven't done that role. So how on earth do you how on earth do you hire for a role that you know nothing about? And it's trying to get this skill of learning enough about a discipline and enough about the outputs to be able to find like kind of the right person. And obviously, it's easy to go and ask people, right? Oh, what does this role look like? There's plenty of people out there that will tell you. But I've seen like it's quite there's this kind of two types of people, I guess you find some that kind of have this I'm the startup, I'm the founder now, I must know all things, and so then don't seek that kind of advice. Like and obviously you get a lot of advice as a founder, and the other challenge is not all of it's going to be correct, but but at least you're sort of researching it, you know. I mean, pick any team in any company at any scale, those roles change as the company grows as well, and so that's a real challenge. But I mean, for me, it's something similar. So, I mean, like I say, I started off thinking, right, I just want to be amazing at coding and building anything because I love making stuff and I just want to build anything I set my heart on. And then I kind of suffered from a little bit of arrogance in terms of like, I now know how to do that hard thing. So everything else is easy, like marketing. That's just like, putting text together and posting it. And I'm going back. I'm going back quite a few years. Okay. I don't think like that. I don't think that now. Sales. Oh, that's just chatting to people. Like, like you kind of have this, and so I certainly, where the reality is done well, everything is incredibly complex again, because we're humans and we are the most complex. Sales is about, talking to humans. Marketing is about creating emotion and talking to humans. And that is the most complex thing in the universe that we know of. So I would say that's obviously going to be a challenge, and a fascinating one, because psychology is too. So I certainly wish I knew more about a wider range of roles, more about the functions of a business. Yeah. It was very easy in hindsight to look back. Yeah, I'd love to go back in time now and start the business with what I know now. That would be amazing. But you kind of got to learn the hard way. So I did pretty much exactly what I was saying. I was the chief finance officer for a long time. It's like learn accounting, sort of, and learn. But then you've got accounting, and then you've got business reporting, sort of the management accounts, which are kind of different. So I learned that, and then I learned all these other things. And I probably didn't need to do quite all of that. So yeah. And the classic build it and they will come, right? It's yeah. So yeah, I think that's what I wish I would knew.
So one more question to add to the mix then is, how can startups use AI, for example, to gain an unfair advantage in the industry? Based on what you know now, what would you suggest?
I mean, I'd almost flip the script and say, if you're not using AI, it might, like we were saying earlier, you're going to have some kind of acknowledgement of AI or some AI strategy. I'm always cautious with the word strategy because it sort of sounds like you're going to write pages and pages of baloney that no one's going to read. It's like, it's not that. Just like, how is your startup going to leverage AI in the future, or is it going to be made irrelevant by AI? So that's what I say. It's almost like, no, you have to build with AI. You can't, there's no other choice. Would be my take on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I'll probably just build a go of, I think AI is a wonderful leveler for startups. You can do so much more with less, and I think that's a wonderful thing. Startups have many advantages over larger enterprise. They don't usually speak about it, but the ability to move quickly, you're not encumbered by archaic process, you're not encumbered by legacy culture. Organizations, as a default, become more risk adverse over time. You can take bigger risks, you can swing bigger bets, you can reiterate. With your communication and marketing, you can be bolder, braver. You don't have a brand yet, you don't have an identity, so you can be more playful, you can have more fun. There are many things that go against you, usually resources. But I think the best thing you can do when you start to get an unfair advantage is just lean into your strengths, which is almost always you don't have legacy, you can move much faster, and you can try more things. And I think if you factor those into a business, you have a better chance of winning as you go through that scaling journey.
Great.
Yeah.
Anyway, that leaves us with 5 minutes. So I'm going to open the floor. Does anyone have any questions? I did see something come through on the chat, actually. Oh, okay. No, someone's just headed off. Yeah, I'll open the floor. If anyone's got any questions, you can pop it in the chat or turn your mic on.
I can go first if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So we spoke about sort of the past and the present, but where do you think the industry will be in like sort of 5 to 10 years time? I know that's probably the $1 million question, but where do you think it could be? Oliver, we can go to you first, and then straight to Steve.
5 to 10 years, I have no idea, my man. I genuinely don't. It feels I watched some nefarious YouTube documentary the other day that terrified the life out of me. However, look, I think two things can be true at the same time. Possibilities and industry and how we behave and how we work will evolve faster than we think, but also people won't change that often. We kind of want the same things. I think it was very much in the generative era or the early days, maybe ChatGPT 3 came out, and Warren Buffett had a quote which I loved. It said, AI may just change everything except for one thing, people. So I think generally speaking, we won't change that much. I think industry will. We'll have new views on how you create startups. I think all economic models are shifting. If you think of a startup, you may have an idea that a SaaS and a subscription business is the right model. We might move to token economics. We might move to usage. We might move to value outputs. I think all these kind of traditional commercial models will look different in the next 5 to 10 years. I think all our jobs will be slightly different, and different skills will matter. I think good taste, creativity, critical thinking, asking the right questions, I think they start to become more valuable. And then beyond that, who knows? Genuinely, I don't know.
Yeah, 5 years is a long time now in a fast pace. And it's interesting actually, yeah, if you think of enterprise, they're going to struggle to adapt, I think, fast, whereas startups will. So we'll see. That'll be interesting. I mean, it depends so the interesting thing at the moment, I think, is the scaling. So we've got these AI models, which their algorithms are kind of simple if you compared to say how like the brain's wired, right? So you've got like a column in the brain, it's wired. It's quite complicated. Most of our AI algorithms are kind of based on very simple sort of how we thought they was done in the 50s. You've got these like point neurons, which maybe have 3 connections. A typical neuron in your brain maybe has like 10,000 or something. So, but obviously we have this hierarchical scale, and then the interesting thing is we have internet scale. So it's taking these models and scaling them to a point where no human could ever have that amount of training data, and that's creating these hyper specialized, like LLM is really a hyper specialized text model, which makes it feel generic because it's able to handle text, but it's actually hyper it's like, it's, and like you get like the game that the deep learning that can play 300 years of StarCraft and be just amazing at StarCraft within these rules. So you have that. Our kind of bet at New Icon and sort of our parent company, Linebreak, is about the real-time enterprise. So this is great. This LLM, this is going to sort of create a new wave of digital transformation, where in the past it's all about organizing data, but now we can organize unstructured data, like the kind of stuff that humans do. And that's going to be really interesting. So that new wave, that's going to take a long time because, it's limited again by people. Like the people, you've got process and technology. And so even if you were to click your fingers and have that future dream now, people's behaviors aren't going to change. And so it's that gradual. And so that product, even if it is the future 5-year version, you were to click your fingers to have it now, because people's habits won't change when you embed that, certainly in a large enterprise or an organization, or just generally in the community, right? There needs to be this flow of gradual adoption. Like, like when the iPhone came out, it had that skeuomorphic design and people were able to use it because the notepad looked like the notepad. The button looks like something you can click. Over time, as people learnt those behaviors, you were able to have like the flat sort of design where it's like, oh, now the plus, everyone knows the plus icon is new. Whereas if they'd launched with that in the early days, people wouldn't have had the same sort of ease of use that they got. And the same thing happens with these technologies, people using AI. But the bet at New Icon, what we're thinking is real time. So where this gets crazy is where, and we're sort of seeing the edges of it, is where AI sort of is unleashed within our physical environments, which we're still not there. It's still trapped inside a computer, inside a box. This is the robotics movement. This is understanding of environments at the speed that we as humans do, where you can just scan a room and see all the objects. You have this conscious experience of where they are. The idea is like this real-time organizations. So we're joining with Linebreak, which have this vision of these real-time organizations which react in real time to real data. So you've got kind of, for that to happen, you need this digital the digital transformation piece where, people have their data, it's all organized, and everything is, in a format that the databases and the digital systems can see it. And then you add this intelligence where you've got like obviously like LLMs that can also see that flow of information, but then you've got real-time sensing and then intelligent action. And another thing people really suffer with, I think companies also suffer with a lot, because the transformations are where, oh, get the data. But what decisions do you want to be better at? And I think most companies really suffer from knowing, certainly in larger companies, they suffer knowing what decisions do we actually want to be better at? What decisions, if we were better at, would effectively make us more revenue or grow the company? And once they've identified that, we will have these agents that can make intelligent decisions in real time, and that's going to be. So I don't. Is that going to be in 5 years? Some of it you can do right now. So just with an LLM, an agent in a for loop, which is like the agentic stuff, and some real time sensing, we can do things right now about like sensing, prediction, predictive analysis, and then just like ringing you up and saying, oh, by the way, you have a problem over here, and I've taken these actions. However, will that enter our physical reality? That's when you get the crazy sort of Tesla dream with robots. It'll be interesting. You've got hyperscaling, but then you've got what's happening in basic neuroscience, where they're taking these models, creating these new algorithms, which are completely different, which maybe don't need the same level of scale, but have this sort of more physical intuitiveness. And that's where you kind of get the Star Wars, sort of the Cambrian explosion of robots. I mean, I'm looking forward to that kind of reality, but I don't know if it might be 10 years away.
It's definitely exciting. And even since we started this conversation 62 minutes ago, it's probably improved 10 times. So in 5 years, it'll be nuts. Yeah, so I just thought I'd ask. But massive thank you to the three of you for putting on this event. I've learned loads, so massive thank you for myself.
No problem.
Thank you everyone for coming. Does anyone have any other questions before we say goodbye? No more questions. Well, thank you, Oliver, and thank you, Steve, so much for today. I will be putting this recording online so you can look back, but I really appreciate both of your time. Yeah, very informative.
No worries at all. Thanks.
Likewise.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
coming.
you, Ella. Thank you.